What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Protocols podcast. As usual, my dancing friend below is Mr. Richard Wyatt. How are you doing today, Mr. Wyatt?
Hey, Dan.
Just...
Just let me be happy. Can't I just be happy to be here and talking about this?
I mean, of course, right?
Okay.
Now I have like the happy song stuck in my head from like Pharrell Williams.
I'm actively fighting it from
Well,
being stuck in my head.
So fun fact, that was actually the song that the bridal party walked out to at my wedding. So it's like forever engraved in my mind anyway, you know. So
It could be worse. It could be Call Me Maybe.
that wouldn't be worse. What would be worse?
That would
about
be
that?
worse.
No,
That would be worse. Yes, it would.
You leave
Call
Carly
it-
Rae Jepsen alone.
It's nothing to do with her as a person. I'm sure she's wonderful, and I don't think she's a bad artist. That song will be forever stitched into my memory. I cannot remove it. This is a strong opinion. I didn't think I would be expressing this early in the podcast.
About something totally ridiculous.
Totally ridiculous and awful. I apologize. Did you want to do an intro, or do you want me to just ramble about things?
Hold please. Shout out to Jempty. So, anyway, as promised, we are back in our bi-weekly schedule. Luckily, I was able to strangle Wyatt a little bit and not fall asleep tonight, so that's a big up. And it all worked out today. So, here are the show notes on the right over here. We have ATP 1 Celebration. We have the September Titan 1 Top 8. We have a mag rayless full constructed, and then of course our final thoughts on everything. So before we get into it, do you got anything to rap about? You know, right before we get into it, and not like Call Me Maybe or Sorry Not Sorry. You know, either one of those things.
Sorry, not sorry. I have less strong feelings about. We did get into it earlier today. I say get into it. This is not. It's maybe a blowing out of proportion. We talked about Chipotle earlier today.
Yeah, we did.
This is during our work days, by the way. This was happening.
During our work days, except I was off today, and I happened to just be playing my top 8 match against Butter, and
on a Monday morning.
on a Monday morning at like 11 a.m. Eastern Standard, 10 Eastern, or 10 Central for him, worked out, and and then we had like 8 people just like hanging out. Just...
It was. I think it was a full room. I think it was the two of you playing and 8 people watching.
Yeah.
And then I think a couple people left when the match ended. And then we all just hung out and talked.
Yeah.
Afterward. Partially because we had Tote swing for 14.
We did have it. Yeah.
In that match.
Real talk. I had to confirm. Like, I didn't believe him when he said it. I was like, what? What was that number? 14?
Yes. Private Tote, 4-star, wave 3, terrible character, swung for 14 in a top 8 match of a September of 2021 Titan 1 tournament.
It was impressive for sure. I would like to note that my impactor did not die, but it hurt like hell.
Fair.
Big facts. Big facts.
Didn't he live on 1?
He did. He had 1 damage on him also. So.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really the only stuff I want to talk about was that I think Chipotle is, 1, not Mexican food. I think it's important to clarify that.
I can agree.
And 2, that while I express distaste for Chipotle, I would happily eat there at an airport.
In an airport?
Yeah. Well, airport food options are, like, you gotta come down here a little bit, right?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Right. And like if like you give me like a kind of generic airport food, right? One diner thing, some place that has barbecue in the name, we'll have no idea what they actually serve. A Cinnabon, some greasy sandwich joint, a McDonald's, and then your 2 or 3 wild cards.
Man, it's almost like you have lived in Philadelphia Airport as much as I have.
I've flown a couple of places and have eaten a lot of airport food in my time. And a Chinese restaurant. That has no business being in an airport. And then like Chipotle is one of the wild cards sometimes, or a burrito place, and Chipotle is not that bad.
And if you're my wife, they're a 10. So.
And you know what? I hope that she enjoys her cuisine.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I'm not doing a very good job of hiding my feelings. You want to get into the Transformers talk, or before I get in trouble with Kylie?
Alrighty then. ATP one on screen now. All right. So a couple weeks back, I had sent you a message and I was like, "Hey, we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of ATP one.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be cool if we asked some of the community members kind of do like a little synopsis on one of the stratagems or two of the stratagems, and like work through what they've done in the game, in the community, their tournament success, their failures, all those things. I was really like, I don't know, I thought it would be a cool thing to do, to celebrate it, because at the end of the day we have been doing this for a year now, which is pretty crazy. So congratulations to you for sticking it through this long, and
Me too.
the rest of the protocols, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But this is definitely it's been really fun. I think we've only gotten through 5 of them now. I think
Let me
1, 2,
see.
3, 4, 5. Yeah,
Anti-air. Yeah, I think it's 5.
5. So we got through 5 of them so far, and different viewpoints from all of us, obviously. Yeah, and it's cool because like thanks to Fortress Maximus and thanks to Teletran One, like we can go back and we can look at the success or failures of a card, through the year, which I thought was like the most intriguing thing. Like literally, you can just kind of like go to Teletran One, type in the name of the stratagem, and then like every deck list pops up, which is really cool, because like it's just a way to get in a mind of like the tournament players, the casual players, like whoever's playing with that card, you can kind of see it there, as long as it's a public deck. And I think it was cool to see, the if anything, the dates actually, like, because you can then really tell the last time someone's actually looked at the card.
Yeah.
Because like in my article, like I posted the last version of the deck that I made, which was for, shout out to Tim Teo, his event for Team PTSD, yeah, Team
PTSD.
PTSD,
Yeah.
in when he was running his events, towards late last year and the early beginning of this year. So it was like that was the last time I had looked at the stratagem to build for a tournament. So it was cool to see that and go like, man, I can't believe I haven't played with this card since like February. So, but it's cool to see those things and kind of go back and like remember, like, oh, like what did this succeed in? What did this, who tried this and failed? Like things like that, because I think it's really cool. And then of course, the other part of it that's really exciting to me is like kind of remember the building blocks of the set and like the whys and the hows of how we like came to it. So that it's just I've just had a lot of fun, kind of like reliving set one, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually been pretty obvious to me. This is a project that we kind of brainstormed a little bit, together a couple weeks ago, but you really like grabbed a hold of it once it got up and running. I mean, when I've been reading your stuff, because I'm kind of getting it largely at the same time or same quality as the community's getting it. It's pretty obvious that you're really having a good time looking back at this stuff, and that there's definitely things that you'd probably change, given how much we've learned, right? We won't be changing anything. That's not how we do things over at the protocols. We print things, and that's the thing that it has, and so everybody who plays, like, they have the card. Save intended text that somehow got overseen. Shout out to Heed the Call. But yeah, like, so, and it's been obvious to me, and honestly, I actually think it's really cool. I think revisiting and seeing the fact that we made it a year has been awesome. That the community's still up and thriving. We're still having tournaments with innovation and the metagame turnover, and people adapt. And I honestly think just like the level of play has even. So let's talk about this too, right? Competitive play for Transformers was, before the pandemic, still in its infancy,
Right. Absolutely.
right? And it's not to say that the game wasn't strategically deep or intriguing, or that people playing it weren't good. It was that, like, the thoughts around what it meant to be good and what you needed to take in account during your play to be good at the game hadn't evolved yet on a community level.
No.
Right? It really hadn't. It still had a lot of steps to go. Like on the whole, it's not. We're not just talking about individuals, right? There's tons and tons of people who were among the best in the world still had to learn, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and not just about not just about playing, but designing too, right? Like we really had to learn. That's why we took it slow with ATP one. That's why we did stratagems for existing characters. That's why we made sure to limit the set size so that we understood what the process meant, entailed, and how much playtesting resources were required for each individual step or card created. And um, as far as reliving the year through the lens of the individual stratagems, I have quite enjoyed that myself. So. Um, I'm partial to the one that I wrote about. Here's the thing, personally, uh, but yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of them.
Right. Um, yeah, I mean it is interesting, like you had brought up the like the potential errata, like it's one of those things where like this was the first thing we had done. We were very clear then that we would not ever do that unless it was something, like Heed the Call, where we just legitimately forgot to write something on a card and it was like, oh no, that's not the intent or the purpose of how that card's supposed to work. Like we
It was
need to
play tested differently the entire way
right,
through play testing.
like it was play tested with the idea that that's what the card meant, and it was a clear mistake on our end of like,
Mhm.
no, like we missed that because we hadn't even thought or considered it because the small testing like group that we had, we all were under like the same understanding of how it worked. And that was like a lesson in itself. It was like, no, like the card needs to be specific. It needs to have these cues. It needs to have this period. Like these were all the growing pains of ATP one. Like it really was, and like that's why like even at the small set that it was, the learning from it was like unbelievable because it's like even after that, like I believe He the Call wasn't the only one that we had to edit. Like there was like misspellings or like misperiods like in a couple of the other ones too that like they all had to get like refixed and revamped. And it was like once we had like figured it out, like man, like this has to be delivered this way, the wording has to be this way, so it all works how we tested it, because that was the point, is like we weren't changing how the card worked at all because of testing. That's not how the card worked. Like so like for the first tournament that it existed, I didn't even learn that it was happening until like halfway through the event. Like someone had brought up like, oh yeah, I took 9 from a Metroplex. I took 9 from the Metroplex minions after he was already dead, and I kind of just lost. And I was like, huh? He's like, yeah. He goes, they just swing out, and they all have Pierce 3. I'm like, no, they don't. They're like, well, yeah, he does, because it's not on the card. I'm just like, what? Like, no, like, oops. Like, all right, we missed that one. We gotta fix that because that's not supposed to be this way. So like that's really like that. I think that was the only one that was like a real like we just totally missed to put the Metroplex on the card type thing, which is it was definitely, like I said, it was a learning curve. Like it was like we missed it, none of us found it. That's also why that was definitely one of the reasons why we opened up the playtesting room for ATP2, because we wanted more eyes on the product. We wanted more people to see it. We wanted to make sure we lessen the mistakes as much as possible. And I'm not going to sit here and say there weren't mistakes made in ATP2 or onward, right? Because like there's still going to be there's errors and things like that. I mean, hell, we just released Primus Pack 2 a couple weeks ago, and we totally missed that Battle Ready was a card in Wave 1. Like,
Yeah.
like
The art was at a slightly different angle.
You were just focused on something else, but it's okay.
I know.
But yeah, the point is that the biggest learning experience from all of it was like truly getting down and learning the repercussions of like mistakes, and not just in like the text box, like just in design period. And like with my article on I Don't Believe in Destiny this morning, it was definitely one of those where like we knew what the card was, we knew what the card could do, we knew how powerful it could be. And we were prepared to move forward knowing those things. And I think that's the biggest part of like what I was trying to tell everyone. It was just like listen, like we knew all these things. We knew what this card was capable of at every check, right? Like we were completely aware of it. And it was just a matter of like, all right, that's fine. We now put this in the game. It's an archetype that never existed realistically. Like graveyard or scrap pile manipulation did not exist before that card. Now, Jetfire always had the ability, but not to the extent that we had given him, obviously. Um, and because of that, it just altered the way we probably would have done things moving forward. Like had we not made that card as powerful as it was, maybe we'd have more cards that interact with scrap piles, for Jetfire to use type thing. But because of the power level of Stratagem, it forced us in a way or directed us in a way to not necessarily overpower him to in a point where it's like this is the only choice, right? And that's the biggest thing for us is that like every one of these cards released here were designed with like every one of them had the intent that you could choose and bring this to a tournament. Specifically in that metagame, in the ATP one metagame, I can't say the same for all of them now. I mean, honestly, you could make the argument that even now the Jetfire Stratagem is not good enough any longer. The results would sure prove that, right? It hasn't succeeded in an event I think since January, so or maybe like a smaller event, like a one day, it might have succeeded a little bit, but definitely not any of the monthly events. It hasn't. I don't think it's seen a top 8 placement since January, February, probably.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. But that's the cool thing, right? Because it's like that just shows. Because then, the opposite of that is like Straxus Lives is in the top 4 of this event. That we played this month. So it's like you still have those cards that are still affecting the metagame in some way.
And Rally almost made it.
No, Rally was in top 4.
Rally in top 4? Oh yeah.
Rally was in top 4.
You're right.
Metroplex was in top 8. So these ATP1 stratagems are still standing tall in the format and still being played, which is also really cool that, it might not be all of them. It might be just some or even half or even a quarter, right? But the point is that these things that were made a year ago are still very much in some ways relevant in the metagame.
And in August in the Titan 1 event, we did have one copy of Here's the Thing make the top 8 as well.
That's right, yeah, with Ziggy, yeah.
It immediately lost out, but it was there.
Right. So yeah, I think that's been the coolest thing is it is that that natural roll down, and honestly it's been really cool, because I did 2 of the first 5 myself. I don't have any more left to do, so it's other community members. So it was really interesting to see Christian and his take on Metroplex and Scott's take on It Works. They're 2 very different cards, and I even had different opinions in some ways of what they wrote about them, which is fine, right? That's the point. That's the debate itself. But it's cool because it's you get to see into the mind of Christian, who is not a part of playtesting for ATP1, right? But he has seen what that card has done through a time, and I believe Christian's also doing such heroic nonsense. So he's also doing Megatron. So we'll get to see that as well, which will be cool. And then I believe you did Here's a Thing, and you're doing the Dinobot stratagems.
I am. I'm doing them as a 2-for-1 special.
Right, and then Smurf is doing Rally and Protection. So and that was a video actually. They recorded a video on it, so that'll be cool to hear them talk through the 2 stratagems, him and Christian, which is pretty sweet. And then Ziggy is doing Straxus Lives. So it'll be cool to see what everyone has to say about the stratagems and through their scope and stuff like that, because that's the coolest thing too. Is it's always great to hear what the community really has to say about these cards after a year.
Yeah, I mean, one of the cool things you see. So, of that list there, right? So Smurf, Christian, and Ziggy, none of whom were a part of playtesting for HP1, right? All excellent players in their own right, and they're going to have different insights, right? They're going to, because they are people whose primary experience with these cards is the gameplay, is the player experience, right? And we talk about negative player experience versus positive player experience a lot in our design discussions and articles, right? And their perspectives is largely informed by the presence or lack of those things, right? And so that's probably going to continue to be evident in the pieces that they put out. And I'm really looking forward to it. I enjoyed Christian's. It's not the first thing I've read or listened to of his, and he, especially someone who has kind of risen to competitive heights amidst the digital era, I think has a lot to input there, and I think you've got the mind of a really interesting kind of out of the box deck builder with Smurf, giving piece 2 protection for 1, which I think is still kind of an underplayed stratagem. I think that one's really awesome. Um, and then, I mean, Ziggy has played Straxus a lot. He's played Darkmount in a lot of decks. He kind of pioneered the original shell for the leaders list that you're playing in this event. Um, and many props to him because it's kind of one of the best things about that deck is it's really is just like a best hits of ATP. It's
Yeah,
like
it
stuff
really
from like
is.
every wave of ATP stuff, which
I
is
mean,
really
like
cool.
my particular list is absolutely that because I get ATP 1, 3, and 4 involved. So
You're not playing Take by Surprise or Catch Off Guard?
I'm playing catch off guard. So ATP 2 is there too. There you go.
ATP 2's there too.
Yeah.
I know Ziggy loves Spotlights too, so he only plays that as like
I
one of his
think I
star
have like
cards.
I think I have lock on late. No, because I went with nothing to lose in the sideboard. So because obviously
Makes sense.
I have nothing
Yeah,
to
because
lose.
right, you don't want to have any regrets.
I don't
right?
have any regrets.
No, not a regret in the
No,
house.
not even a single letter.
Not even a single letter. That's maybe a little too much of a deep dive. So I think as far as the rest of these go, I'm glad we get to do something like this. It's cool to kind of just look back and see what's outcome from things that you've made, see what are things you've learned, and honestly, where would you change certain things? I mean, that's I think if you're not looking back at your older material with ideas of what you would do better if you could do it over again, I think you're missing important lessons that are available within that material that exists.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's also one of those like if you can't admit your faults, then you'll never change, right? Like
Absolutely.
I mean, like I wrote 2 articles about like I wrote in one of them I wrote that like anti-air battery is just a straight miss. Like we just
Hmm.
the card just realistically never needed to exist, and because of that, we probably should have never made it. Even with its low success rate, like it's just not a card that's necessary to the game. So with that information, like I think we really did like we used that information a bunch moving forward. It was like every time we came to like a brick wall on a character or on a battle card, it was just like, well, do we need this? Like that question comes up so goddamn often between all of us where it's just like realistically it's like, do we need this? And if the answer is no, then we just don't make it. Like it just goes away.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I have loved having the defunct versions folder in our Google Drive.
Big true.
I occasionally will peep back through some of the old versions of cards and just laugh about things we thought were good enough and weren't, things that we thought weren't good enough and were way too like much, or things that just like either didn't work or didn't make sense, right? And sometimes it takes it getting into a game or a match for that to really make itself especially evident,
Well,
right?
if it
And I
didn't-
think
if it didn't make it to that folder, it probably didn't make it to a match. So there's that.
that's right. That's right. It's probably buried on one of my computer drive files somewhere, or in one of the forum posts. And one of the things too, right? So like, the idea there, uh, I think you hit this point like directly earlier, but the idea that our space set's important, right? Every card we print, we want to be important. We want to have play space, and the idea that it has home use or niche that is important, whether it is sideboard, main board, but that the card will have an impact, and is important in either teaching the community something, giving them a tool in case, as a safety valve in case things rotate in a way that are unhealthy, or whether it is combating a popular negative play experience strategy, or whether it is reducing consistency for certain decks, or increasing it for others, giving people incentives to broaden the character pool that is selectable, right? I mean, you saw that with head on when ATP 3, right, with traits matter, right? With traits mattering like that, like who's actually part of your team is a huge, important thing, right? Leaders as an archetype is not something that existed prior to that. It just isn't,
No.
right? And
Matrix
even though
or Matrix leadership and Calor's leadership were not carrying. They weren't carrying events.
they're interesting cards,
Yeah.
right? They're interesting cards. Matrix, because of the nature of its pips, was playable in a million different decks, right? And because in the early game, the lack of Pierce that was available elsewhere. But like, Valiant Effort is an enormous reason to be a leader. The leader pip on withdrawal protocol is a huge reason to be a leader, right? Like you do get these added benefits for these archetypal, and I think that's one of the coolest things I've mentioned before, that I thought Wave 5 of the kind of core sets from Transformers trading card game it was broken in a lot of places, but what they did do was they created a ton of strategic depth with the mechanics that they left us, with the tribal pips, right? They left us with headmasters, the idea of like different character modes, and the customizability faction of things, stratagems. Like all of these are huge wells of, I guess, like just design space.
Right.
And we've been living in and around those, like ever really since.
Yeah, I mean, like the most unique thing about the original design team was the idea that every set they did give us something different, right? So like because they played that way, because they designed that way, it only gave you more to mess with, right? And I think that was crucial. I mean, we've said this, leading up to ATP4, but like Titan Masters were very, very much influencing Legends. Like the whole concept of getting this other character when it dies, like all of that, like was very much because like if they didn't do Titan Masters, like I don't know that we would have been able to get to that same idea, when we did, because it's like all the work was done to an extent of like, okay, we understand that we can do this, like there's a way to make this make sense in the game, right? And like that helps. It was just a matter of figuring it out for the way we were trying to tell it. But the same thing with the combiners. Like the combiners they're able to be visited whenever we whenever we want to create our own combiner team. If we did, we did refurbish, I should say. Refurbish.
Yeah, and shout out to Superion for winning the last Titan 1 event.
Right. So like it's all there. Like so it's very cool that because of the way they designed their first 5 sets, minus between 3 and 4, right? Because that was kind of like just a build on basically just one giant set, realistically. But
right, it's almost like they printed the B side first, though.
Yeah,
have you ever noticed that?
Oh,
like
yeah.
It feels like they printed the B side, and we were like, "What's this?"
Well, it was
they
more
printed
like
the A side, and you're like, "Oh,
it's
A plus B."
I don't like that at all. Like I'm sorry, I do like that comparison, but I also think of like
that's fine.
Here's like the A track, but then like here's like the hidden track that everyone really wants to listen to. Like that's how I look at it. It's like, no, dude, everybody wants the good shit that's hiding. It's like, can we get that? All right, cool. But like it was really good that the way that they left the game, as powerful as it was, because we all know that it was powerful. I mean, we've beaten that horse beyond belief, but it's because of what they were willing to do in their set creation that it did give us the ability to like really come back with it. And the stratagems was something we didn't even like. That's another thing from Wave 5 that's just that's just everything. Like that's what we designed an entire set around stratagems, because we're like, well, they gave us this gift. And I mean, we all know that they were all bad, basically, from Wave 5. Like there's like
Stealth
90...
mission was okay. The spotlights have gotten better over time
because better star cards. Because
better star cards. That was one of the initiatives we tried to push, right? But like,
but
what else? Is there anything else that was really playable from those?
It is very minimal. Very minimal.
You could argue that the Windsweeper stratagem was
all right. Stop.
Playable.
Just no. Anyway. They were 95% unplayable. Fair.
They're fun Primus cards.
And I think even the ones that you just named were the ones for characters for Wave 5, right? So, like, all of the retro stratagems are incredibly unplayable. I mean,
they're really bad.
They're just bad.
The closest one is probably the one that gives 4 health to
that's Windblade.
Starscream Decepticon Kings.
Oh, okay. I thought the Windblade one, but yeah, I think you're right. It is Starscream. It's Usurper.
I think it's Usurper. I think that's the closest one to playable, and even that one's still like.
Well, it's because
that's a miss.
That's because he's not very good.
No, he requires you to put 3 Decepticon crowns in your deck, and then you have to put more stuff that puts Decepticon crowns on top back from your hand and onto your deck, and that's just a lot. That is asking a lot of the player base.
Listen,
for 14 stars.
Once upon a time ago, I top forward with that character. Like that was a very long time ago, but that character is bad.
if you dig deep enough back in the Reddit, and I don't recommend anyone does.
No.
There is a deck report from me
Ooh.
from Wave 2
Oh boy.
of a deck that I called Fruit Loops.
Oh yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
It was a 2 tall deck in Wave 2 that I took to some really good finishes in locally. That doesn't mean anything. Of Grapple and Starscream Decepticon King, and it was one of the most fun decks I've ever had the joy of playing.
There you go.
It was terrible,
Okay.
but I like 2 tall. What do you want from me?
That's fine. I mean, Palmer agrees with you. Palmer loves Too Tall also.
That's because Palmer gets it.
It's true. But I think that was the coolest thing is that, with the leaving of Wave 5 with the Stratagems and with us all pretty much agreeing that they were a large miss, it was very easy to design set 1 just with Stratagems because it was like we knew we could make an impact and it didn't have to be some large card pull or anything like that. We were able to make an impact with correctly choosing characters from set 1. Even like we didn't even open up past set 1 here. Like this is just Wave 1 Stratagems. Like
I know, which is wild to think about.
It's crazy to think that in some shape, 10 out of 11 of these Stratagems has succeeded. So like that's the crazy thing. At least 10 of the 11 Stratagems have had a top 8 or better on their resume in a year.
That's so true. I think the only one that hasn't is Protection, if memory serves.
Protection is the only one, and for what it's worth, its play is incredibly minimal.
Yeah.
It's very, very minimal. I mean, Smurf was one of the people we sought after to write about Protection because he's only one of the few people to ever play it to any type of success.
In a tournament, yeah.
I think he went like 500, and I think he actually had a good meta call with it when he played it. He just didn't get to play against the meta he was betting on. But I think like that's the real truth. Is like that's the only card that, it was designed for the reason that it was, and it had a place if like the metagame shifted a certain way, and the metagame just never really shifted that way. Like it just didn't. Like it didn't get overpowered with certain things that we thought it would, right? And that's just like an absolute fact. Like if anything, Protection was like a safety valve for ourselves in a way. Because we're like, all right, well, like we need some type of way to interact in set 1, and this was that way to do it. But like, as good as Jetfire was, Jetfire was never a deck that was like even 10% of the meta, to be honest. Like same thing with Such a Rogue Nonsense. Even in a world where that deck was good, it was at best 2 in an event, right? So it's like these cards that we thought would succeed more than they were, but now they have a success rate. They've won events, they've top 8, they've finals, they've done all those things, but they never took over a metagame. And I think that's why Protection didn't get the looks that it was there to get, because at the end of the day, the decks that it was designed to interact with were never very threatening to an entire metagame.
Right, the metagame hadn't condensed to them, and I think the problem with the Inferno strat there is that it needed the metagame to kind of condense for it to really be good.
Right, and even as like a sideboard option,
yeah.
I think, and the other big thing with that is that we at the time didn't really have that set up either, right? Like we didn't have like a 13-7-5 or like even like a 15-5-5. Like those things, like they weren't being played in the early set 1 or ATP 1, ATP 2 metagame. So like that didn't really
work.
It didn't really come around until like the ATP 3 metagame, when the big boys kind of came back out. But at that point,
the rise of Big Boy Blue.
Right. Like at that point, I think Protection was just missed. Like, like it was just like it just didn't have its time. Same thing, like Jetfire went away, Megatron went away, so these things that were like really designed to safety valve it, they just weren't there, so. But yeah, all in all, it's been great, going through this set again, and to this day, like I said, in top 4 of this month, you have a Rally, you have a Lord Straxus, or a Straxus Live, so like right there you have 2 of these stratagems still seeing play a year later, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, and we, never too far from the format. We've got the Metroplex Stratagem, which just came off the ban list.
Right.
I saw like 2 Jetfire decks in the tournament or something along those lines, 2 or 3.
I know there
I
was
played
one
against
because
one.
I played against one. Yeah, who did you play against?
I want to say it was Timmy.
All right, I played against Timmy also, so who knows?
Okay, who knows? I want to say there were two decks, and I don't think either of them performed especially well. And the truth of the matter is that I actually take that as a really good sign for us. So we have been actively policing the playability, the viability of utilities and armors we've made since the release of that. You stressed this in your article too, but cards that incidentally might serve as support for that character and that stratagem are things that we have actively been watching and um, almost neutering the interactions of. Uh, with that specific line of play on purpose. We have not printed a super effective 7-star ranged character that especially Autobot, that fits with him. It's one of the reasons
that would have been better than Captain Impactor. Like that
that would have
is
been rather than Captain Impact. That is the ceiling of
just
right now.
doesn't exist.
I know, which is wild. But I also think, like if you look at Mercenary B being a true mercenary and being melee and not being a specialist or ranged, largely because of that, like the way that that card was playable in playtesting with
The
Jetfire.
specific wording on opportunism
Yep,
is there because of Jetfire.
there's a put restriction because of Jetfire, because Jetfire pulling it out of the scrap pile seemed too free, and we didn't like that. So, I mean, and we could go back through every armor and utility we've made and point to places where this is the case. I don't really think we need
No.
to, but I'm just saying like it's been a front of our mind concern the entire time.
Absolutely.
And the only other card, let's see, is the only other cards that like I think we're really mindful of printing interactions with, Dynabots a little bit.
Dinobots for sure.
Um,
I mean, like
although
we haven't even made another Dinobot card since set one, right? Like
No.
not one.
we did give them two stratagems, one of which is essentially free.
Right, we did. We absolutely did. And for what it's worth, I will stand by that they needed them, right? Like they just if they only got one, they just would never have been playable. Like they absolutely needed both of them to even attempt to like exist.
Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, We had the most text on it of any ATP card.
What is it now?
It doesn't. It does
know
not
you know.
anymore.
What is it now?
It is.
Is it just one of the legends?
I think that it is technically, if you count the reminder text, I think it is Ghost Starscream.
I can believe that. I
Um,
can believe that.
I think it is Ghost Starscream who has the most text on him, but that might not even be right. It might be. I would have to look this up. I actually don't think I know which card has the most.
I could
of
see
any
it being
ATP
Megatron
card.
for what it's worth.
Megatron, if you count the front side, but I think I would look at like one side being like the most amount of text. The problem is Megatron on the front side really does have a ton of text, doesn't he? It's a wall.
Yeah,
Maybe it is Megatron.
I think it's
Maybe
Megatron.
it's pre-Arise Megatron might be it.
I think it's pre-rise. I think so.
All right.
But
well, we'll
who
you
knows?
comment which card you think it is
Yeah.
down below
There you
on the
go.
YouTubes.
There you
Do
go.
the algorithm thing, Dan. We don't want to say like and subscribe.
Oh, like, subscribe, comment, all of the
Comment.
all of
I almost
the
forgot
above.
that one.
You can't
Yeah,
forget
do all that
comment,
stuff.
obviously.
Isn't what's the other one they say? The little bell icon.
Oh yeah, you
ring
can click
ring
the
little.
notification bell, so whenever we go live with a video, you get a
Yeah.
message. It's so great. All those
Spoiler alert,
things.
we'll be here every 2 weeks. But
But you'll know exactly when to the second.
that's true.
Second.
Okay, Dan.
All right.
I gotta say this. All right, so before we move on from ATP one stuff,
Okay,
I gotta
okay.
ask you two questions, and
Ooh.
I'll answer them as well. So
Oh,
questions
all
for
right.
both of us.
All right, all right.
So, what is your favorite stratagem? That's not true. What stratagem from ATP one do you think was the closest to perfect as is? And what stratagem, in your opinion, from ATP one, is the one that you wish you could go back and change the most?
The closest would be Rampage.
Okay.
I love Rampage. I think it embodied Dinobots. I really do. I think that card is so great and so much fun and so interactive with Dinobots and the way that like even the game designers design Dinobots, in my opinion. So I really really love that card. I think the easy one for me is Heed the Call. Like I 100% regret making a 0-star stratagem. I will never do it again. It'll never ever happen again. There will always be some type of a cost on a card for any card that we ever make. It's just at the end of the day, it was nice to give Metroplex a way to be played and loved again, and like I understand why we did it and why it was important to do it at the time, but the idea that like it's just this free thing with no actual cost. If I were to like restructure it to have a cost, I think I would be okay with it. But like realistically, the way that it's printed right now, that just doesn't exist. Like even if it was just like start with like 3 damage on you or something like that, like literally just something so it's not free. I would have been way happier with that card long term, I think.
Totally fair. I'm going to resist my urge to say here's the thing. And I'm going to say such heroic nonsense, I think, is the closest to perfect of the wave of the ATP1 stratagems. I think that card does everything we wanted it to do. It's, it's one ability. It is 1 star. It has a great name. It's for a terrible character who people really did love. And I think if I had to fix one, it would have been Heed the Call. You stole my answer. And for me, the biggest thing, I would have made it Pierce 2.
That's fair.
And I think that would have been really, really, really good still.
I think you can make an argument that like you just don't even need the hold the line. Like in all honesty, like that card would have been playable with guys just get Pierce 3.
I think it could have. I think it also could have had not the damage restriction, but it could have had just a repair one.
Sure.
I think that would have been a totally reasonable way to do it too.
Yeah. There's definitely. It's to me, it's the most obvious one. Like it's just too free.
Also, shout out to It Works for scaring every one of us into thinking it was going to break something and then not.
Yeah, I think we did a pretty fair job long term on it. There was definitely a few conversations early on about it and how bad it could be, and then you watch enough games and you see enough gameplay and you go, no, that one's okay.
Yeah. Like, that card is weird and cool and really complicated and impossible to play perfectly, and we're leaving it how it is.
Exactly. What I just because you brought it up, what I liked most about the card is the fact that we did use the tap interaction on it.
Right? I love the tap interaction on it. I think it's awesome
because it's just such a thing in the game that's not utilized. Yeah, it's just not like it. Like we talk about the game on a resource system all the time, and like that is an active resource that you can use in a turn. It is. It's written in the rule book, but the times that it's been used in actual gameplay without It Works is pretty low. It's pretty
almost nothing. It's essentially nothing. I think you would not be especially wrong to say it's never.
I would say 99% of the time. I mean, I have
Road Hugger gives +3.
Nope, sure. Wasn't gonna go that. I can't even remember which specific air strike patrol right now does this, but the one that scraps 3 cards from someone's hand. I have done that before.
Is that Nightflight who does that one?
I think it is Nightflight, but I didn't want to give it the best ability and the best stats for a 4-star. But
it's a 3/7/1 in bot mode, Dan.
I think I have
it is. Listen, Tote is a 5 health character with 1 less attack. Now, you tell me, and the ability and the pip color on Nightflight is better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And their lord is better.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't. We could sit here and talk about how the airstrike patrol were probably where the patrols were. All the patrols were supposed to be, and they very clearly did not invest in having more than 1 be competitively viable.
Well, you can make the same argument for combiners in set 2.
Yes, I think to be fair, like if they're all viable, I do think that like you do run into a this is weird. Do all the decks just look the same?
Right.
Problem.
I agree.
And that would suck.
But it's also very clear when you print cards with 3 health on them. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, it's in your face. It's right here.
That's
right?
all I'm saying. It's
Or
it's
5
like,
health and 2 attack and 1 defense.
It's just a
and
straight,
they're a soccer mom van.
It's just a straight insult to have 3 health on a 4-star character. I don't know what
Unbelievable.
else to say.
Not even 1 health a star. Not even 1 health.
Like,
Come on now.
Like Grax, just Grax. Just compare
Flame
that.
War
with
has
it.
10 health. Night Racer has 11 health for 5 stars. That is more than 2 health per star. And for those of you who are wondering why, Richard, Wyatt, you don't care at all. Like, who cares about all this? I literally sat down when we first set out for ATP 1, and I made a spreadsheet of every character with every stat, with every matrix of health versus offensive potential versus health versus defensive potential, averaged it among the stars, and created a tool we could use to calculate along the curve. And it blows my mind that Flack or whoever it is has 3 health as a force. It breaks something inside of me.
It's really bad, guys. Don't play it. It's really bad.
You want to move on?
Next. All right, so let's talk. We have not concluded this event yet. We are currently in the top 4. Ironically enough, instead of playing our top 4 matchup, we're doing this podcast instead, because it is Wyatt and myself playing in the top 4. Waiting, of course, is Mr. Christian Young in the finals, just waiting to beat one of us, if we're being honest at this point. But
I don't think either of us has a good matchup into his deck.
He crushed me in Swiss. Like the games were not close at all.
He beat Butter. my one. I think my one loss in Swiss was Butter, and he beat me, and he beat Butter. So
yeah, it wasn't close. Was not close. But in the meantime, speaking of Butter,
shout out to Christian. Congrats on your win.
Yeah, basically, congrats on the win already, bro. But we did have the top, like, the 5, 6, 7, and 8 deck list to look at, because none of this is published in the tournament breakdown yet. So we can't really go through that yet because the event's still going on, and I don't want to reveal Christian's list or Wyatt's list because that's not fair. I can put my list on there because I don't really give a shit. But
most people in the tournament know my list at this point. Everyone in top 8 already knows.
Actually,
my list.
I posted my list in general chat in Discord today, so like everybody has my list. But yeah, so today we have to start. We have our good friend Butter, who shout out to Butter. He is awesome and fun to play with. And he was my top 8 opponent today, and he took on. I did not go and do the extra research here and compare this list to your list that you made the finals with last month.
Card for card.
Okay, so it's card for card. It looked pretty similar.
He told me that.
I believe it. I mean, it was a good deck, right? Like, it was a great deck. It got you a finals, like, yeah. And it's played well. So, like, we've seen this deck before. We actually discussed this deck a little bit on the last podcast, so I don't think we need to break this down too much, but just to say that it's very clear that this 4-wide orange deck that Optimus Prime, Orion Pax Legend, has created it is probably the most consistent deck in the metagame to this point. I believe it has now, this is its 3rd top 8 appearance.
It is in a row. It's 3 of, I think it's 3 of 4 or 3 of 3.
I think it's 3 of 3 because it was.
I think it's 3 of 3
because it was 2 Titan 1 events and a full constructed event. So, like, you know, you even top 8 a full constructed event with it.
Yeah, but I got demolished in top 8, and my Swiss was not easy.
Sure. So I think it's very clear to say that this, and now this is a second pilot as well. So it's not like it's just the pilot either. It's clearly the deck has power. And it was definitely one of the more dominant decks of this Titan 1 metagame. The win ratio on this deck is probably really, really phenomenal.
It's really good.
Yeah.
And I will say this, one of the reasons why I built the deck, this version of the deck, and you can ask Butter about this. I don't know what his actual matchups were running through the field. But
I know his loss in Swiss was to Christian.
Okay. I know that this deck was built the way it was to beat Ghost Starscream.
I don't know if he played any, but yeah.
As long as Ghost Starscream is in the metagame and relevant in the metagame, this deck is great because it crushes Ghost Starscream. You're wider than most of the Ghost Starscream decks. You have little crappy attacks that you can throw into Starscream.
You mean like when you swing for 14 with Tote?
So you can use swing with 14 for Toad, or you can upgrade somebody else and then throw Toad into Starscream, and then you can proceed with the strategy of so you have a spy satellite uplink available to you, but you don't have to take that route. Like you are more than capable of just only of saving Starscream for last.
Right. Right.
And saving Starscream for last is a really effective way to steal some of his legs out from underneath him, because it prevents him from doing what he does best, which is spreading damage amongst his team. The play patterns around Starscream mean that it's really easy for him to encourage setups where your opponent has to spread their damage. And so you end up weirdly with a lot of characters who have like 6 to 7 damage on them, and your opponent's lost 2 guys because you focus those characters.
Yep.
Right? And so, like, the raw resource of how many attacks do I get is something your opponent is losing the battle on.
It was definitely difficult for myself to line up against today, and like I knew going into the match that I had to play a very specific way. Like I knew I had to quote steal the attack from the legend, which is the only reason I won games 1 and 3 was because I was successful in doing that strategy. But like outside of like really specifically attacking this deck on that angle, it was definitely a very difficult deck to line up across from.
It also is a weird thing where Spy Satellite Uplink is pretty bad against it. It has 3 characters that say stealth on them.
Yeah.
And it's pretty, and Spy Satellite Uplink is somehow bad against it, which is just true because by the time you get to the wheel, it's just Powertrain and packs.
Yeah.
Left like, almost every time.
I had a scenario in game 2 or in game 3 where like I had kind of either option, like where I had the Spy Satellite, I had a couple damage on the Powertrain from like a Dark Mount throw because like I was trying to specifically time the throw to kill the legend on the wheel, but like I had to make a real decision in the game where like, do I want to set up a one-shot kill on Powertrain or do I want to try and set up a one-shot kill on the legend? And like about 2-3 turns in the game, I'm just like, I don't know why I would kill Powertrain. Like it's clearly not the correct play in this particular matchup where like stealing the legend is just the way better line for me. And I'm not saying that's always going to be true by any means, but like in that set of game that I played today, it was just like, no, like I have to just get rid of this legend if I can.
Yeah. I will hit 2 last points in this deck and we can move on to the next one. First is, this is the best confidence deck you'll ever play.
No.
Confidence is incredible in this deck. It's absolutely insane.
It was incredible in Blaster. Come on, man.
It's fine in Blaster. This deck naturally draws 4 cards through the game if you don't draw Show of Mastery. This is the best confidence deck you'll ever play. Also, confidence being an Autobot card is relevant for the attack on Prime. So
I will say that Show of Mastery looked fucking awesome in this deck. Holy
it's shit. Really good in the deck because it's like the ultimate setup play. Because
in game 2 he had like 9 cards in his hand. I was like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. Hey, it's an orange deck I built, Dan. It draws cards.
It's very true.
I love drawing cards. And the second thing I wanted to say, oh wow, did I just forget my last point? I think I maybe just forgot my last point.
You're welcome.
Here it is. So, of any deck in the metagame, this deck has 3 distinct openings. And I think that is insanely cool. But I think that there are real matchups where the best first attack is Pax, the best first attack is Tote, or the best first attack is High Jump. And the fact that is the case, I think, is an absolutely fascinating thing.
And when your opponent puts that in end hostilities, it feels real bad.
Yes, no, you lose to end hostilities super hard. You're a dedicated orange deck. I think there was 1 black pip in the main and 2 in the side. Yeah. We said we are gonna lose to end hostilities. That's what because it wasn't the metagame.
Mm-hmm. True.
Right.
Big true.
And you could adapt.
Yeah.
You could play some stuff. But
I mean, he still would get like even through end hostilities, he was still hitting like 10, 11 attacks with the right set. But it was just the fact that it wasn't like 15 to 17, like some dumb number, you know. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there were definitely multiple games when I was playing this deck where I just like swung for 15 like 3 times in one game.
Yeah, I believe that.
All my little dudes immediately puttered out after they did it, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
Right? Because if they take 6 and they deal 15, we won that.
That's very true. All right, we're gonna move on to Aquari. Shout out to Aquari, our good friend. He was playing Heralds. This is the first time we've seen Heralds in a top 8 since the release event.
Mm-hmm.
It has been
Where it dominated in the release event.
Absolutely dominated the release event. Well, like Megatron was like 4 of in the top 8 or something like that. Like it was unbelievable. But like since then, Megatron has not done a damn thing. Like he just hasn't been around. He's been like vastly underplayed in my opinion. But this time, Aquari came back, got in the top 8, playing Heralds, and everyone that I had talked to that like had messaged me about this deck was like, man, this deck is sweet, this deck is cool, this deck is awesome. So shout out to Aquari for clearly being a good, fun competitor because people like this deck.
I love Heralds. And I think we talked about this a little bit offline, but I think the reason that it showed up so prevalently, is that the right word?
I'll take it.
Sure, we're going to go with that.
I'll allow
prevalently in the release event is because Heralds is a prefab team.
Yeah.
Right? They all say Herald. They all like to play with orange cards. They all like to play with flipping lots of cards and colors.
Right.
Right, between Scourge and between the Bold and between the backside Galvatron after the Rise. And they're on rate or above rate. Largely, save Cyclonus, who is, health-wise deliberately understated. And I think that, like, when you look at them, you go, oh, well, I'll just play those guys, and I'll figure out what the deck looks like. And for a release event, that's, like, the perfect strategy to go to, right? Like, those prefab decks, like, right upon release, that's, like, when they're largely their most powerful. The metagame is the least settled. They take the least amount of work to figure out, really. And I think one of the things you saw was, like, in the events following the release event, people started to experiment more. They started to try, cards outside of their prefab teams. They started to try old archetypes with new cards in them. They started to try all sorts of weird mid-rangey good stuff decks. And the fact that Herald has come back around, I think, is really indicative of the format being really aggressive, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
Because Herald's is one of the best force field decks in the game. It naturally wants to play a lot of white pips because it's part of its card advantage engine with Scourge. It wants to flip multiple colors of cards for the backside of Megatron. And so and also has multiple. I think it has a range character who stays around the whole time. So Valiant Effort is a reasonable card in the deck too. So like you have a lot of like play to you that I really think is one of the reasons why Aquari did so well. And the fact that it was fun to play against does not shock me because Herald is a super interesting deck.
Shout out to the 14 one-ofs in this list. That's all I'm saying.
My personal record is 17, and I think you registered 19 in Jetfire once.
I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I registered. Yeah. 19 one-ofs. My God, Dan.
What's up? All right, moving on. So this is, of course, our Metroplex, played by Nanotech. I just looking at the numbers, it looks pretty,
Pretty stock.
Pretty stock, run of the monk. Looking at the pip colors and stuff like that, so I'm not too shocked about that. I don't know. I realistically do not know like what type of leeway there is in deck creation for this character anymore, at least, because like you're not getting any new orange blues. Like you're not going to get any of those things ever, right? So it's a matter of like what cards can I play outside of my orange and blues that are probably interchangeable, but like. It's really hard to not play hit and run, right? Like as a white-black, as a flip character. Like so that's just seems like another stock card. It's really hard not to play fight for position. There's just so many of these cards that like I look at in this deck list. I'm just like, man, a lot of these you just kind of have to play.
Yeah, the biggest contention around Metroplex deck building is do you play Master of Metallicata or not? And he opted to.
And I think the other one is like, do you play the doubles? So like he has them both in here, and I've seen lists that don't play either of them either, right? So I think that's like, but I agree, like it's probably those cards that are like the most like do I do this type cards, and he has all three of them. So I mean I imagine his success rate was pretty good he
top aided.
Right, he did
and one of his losses was me, so
fair. So yeah, I mean, I think that was his only loss in Swiss was to you. So
then I was his only loss in Swiss.
Yeah,
and I do not know what matchup he played against in top 8.
He played against Smurf in top 8. and I think
Yeah, that sounds rough actually.
well, Rally's a pretty good card against it. So
Yeah, Rally is really really good into Metroplex.
so yeah,
Attack, what attack? Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I will say this too. He, I know in our match he missed 2 triggers in one game,
Wow,
and that was absolutely it. So like,
wow.
Metroplex still lives and dies by the deck.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's funny because me and Christian talked about this after our match. Like, both of our lists were, like, designed with the idea that Metroplex was going to exist by playing, like, the Belligerents and End Hostility suite. So, like, we're very much on the same plan of, like, no, like, we're just not going to lose to Metroplex. So, I would have loved to play against Metroplex and Swiss. Like, I think I would have
I
been
did not want to
great.
play against it. I literally I eschewed my Metroplex max and I was like, Metroplex. Who cares about Metroplex?
Fair.
And then hit. You know, I my sideboard character was absolutely. I had to bring in Wave 1 Wheeljack. I'm playing Car Scream in this event. Everyone knows.
Yeah.
But I brought in Wave 1 Wheeljack in the post board games, and he doesn't die in one attack, and he swings for an absolute just nuclear swing when he comes in.
Just
so
dumb number. Yeah.
yeah, just just Master Metallicado, grenade launcher, swing into your Metroplex. Oh, you missed your trigger. Cool, you're dead. Swing for 17, and you're like, all right, well, but
All right. And then moving on to, we finally get to get this deck on camera and like talk about it a little bit more. But he made another top 8 appearance, Mr. Soviet there. He named the deck Salty Runback. I guess he was upset about the top 4 loss. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him. But
and unfortunately he was my quarterfinals opponent, so I had to take him out again.
So he's gonna. Let's hope there's not a salty run back. All right, you know what I'm saying?
The saltier
run back.
You have to do it for everything. So it'd be the saltier runner backer.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I don't think we're gonna do that. That seems ridiculous.
No, it sounds great. And then we'll do if it's another one, it'll be the saltiest runnest backest. Boom, easy. See, Dan, do you hear those crickets in the background?
I do, actually. But while you were talking and I just was ignoring you, right? Because you were going way off course. What's really cool that I've just realized about this top 8 is that there was an Orion Pax, there was a Starscream, there was a Megatron, and there was a Hot Rod. So this particular event had 4. It had all 4 legends. Shout out to Hot Rod for going undefeated in Swiss and in top 8, and he's probably going to win the finals, as we've already stated already once. So yeah, I mean, it's cool that Hot Rod did get in there, but it was also cool that this event was so wide open that all 4 of them managed to find a way in. And there was even, we were talking about this earlier too, there were 3 decks that didn't have a legend, which was the Rally, which was myself on leaders, and then the Metroplex that we just talked about. So yeah, so like it was a 5-3 legends and non-legends, and I think, so me and the Metroplex didn't have a Titan Master either. So I was probably like the most unique out of all of it because I didn't have a legend or a Titan Master, and I didn't have a 0-star Stratagem. So there's that. But yeah, so this is like we talked about this list at length in the last event. In the last podcast, so we don't have to go too crazy into it, but we just wanted to show off the top 8 deck list and kind of give you guys what it looks like. And I'm sure maybe the next one we'll have like a little spot where we just look at the overall top 8 stats again, kind of look at what that was going to look like. But pretty cool.
Shout out to Grenade Launcher for being the most played card in the last, I think, 5 tournaments.
Did not play it. What's up? How you doing?
I just said most played.
I know, but I didn't, everyone thought I was crazy today because I wasn't playing Grenade Launcher.
I don't know if you're crazy. I think it's a deck building choice that I wouldn't have made, which maybe is why I didn't think the deck was as good as it is, right? Maybe it's better without it. That is a very, very, very real possibility. Dan?
Anything's possible. I mean, I gotta be right every now and then,
I'd say you're right like a gentleman's 30% of the time.
30%. Okay.
I'm kidding. It's obviously more.
It's obviously like 26. It's fine.
36, Dan. 36.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Let's not be so critical of ourselves, shall we?
So, as the last Titan 1 event, how was your feelings on the event? Like, did you have fun? Did you see some cool stuff, even new and innovative? going into, this was the last Titan 1 event of the season, probably. Well, it was,
Uh,
in fact.
it was last Titan 1 event of the season, and it wasn't it was a new Titan 1, right? We had Rally came back, we had the Jetfire Stratagem, I Don't Believe in Destiny came back, we had Heed the Call come back off the ban list, and all of which are things that I feel pretty good about.
Yeah.
I actually think that Rally topping, I think it was one copy played and one copy topped, and you could really, really argue that there should have been more copies of Rally in this event.
Yeah.
I think the metagame is prime for the card. It's super good into Legends at stealing the attack from the Legend mode character.
It's definitely very good. I agree.
I think that your leaders deck has been slept on for a long time. I remember back when Menasor was the name of the game, and the leaders deck was one of the hardest matchups, the matchups I most consistently lost.
Yeah, because you realistically the prison Menasor deck just didn't do a lot of damage, right? Like
you did not.
Even in the world where you're like, oh, I'm just gonna belligerence every turn, like they're like, okay, well, like I still defend for like 6. So it's like even then you're like, my God, like I'm still not even killing, like I'm not even one-shotting characters at that point. And then with down but not out included and getting draw, so getting out of the prism and stuff like that would even be even more to the
drawing out of the
deck.
prison. So gross. Even just like I combine, you get to draw 2 cards off of the
and I go
Stratagem,
and it's my turn,
and it's your turn then, right? Or like you get to if you flip a pocket processor, then you get to just like pitch one of those new cards you got and get the pocket processor, and I have no window to interact with the card.
Right.
And that is one of the intentional design pieces behind Down but Not Out. It is a card that is targeted for combiners, especially Menasor the Prison versions, and is targeted for Legend mode characters. And
it's been good. It's been very good.
The card is just good. If you use every part of the Buffalo, that's fantastic. But if you use part of it, that's probably good enough.
Yeah, I've ironically I felt the draw card enough for sure. Like I had a lot of games where I just had like an early pocket processor, which is like what that deck wants to do. It's the reason why I was playing 2 of them in my list, because I'm like I want to see this card like as early and often as possible. But the other stationary effect, it's like I really haven't seen that, because my strategy against Legends have basically been I'm gonna one shot them, like I'm just gonna kill them. So like I'll get the natural +1 that like one time or whatever, which is fun. But like realistically, like I haven't gotten like I imagine like your list, the Orion Pax list gets a little bit more value out of that second stat for it. So, but
it does.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is really interesting about the top 8 is that it is basically, I would say it's like 7 different decks for the most part, and like Christian's and my list are like, they had like the same ideas in mind. He's definitely way more orange than I am, like I'm way more close to the mix, but like the concept of like this 3-wide, like big stuff kind of deck is bit like they were all kind of built on the same little landscape. I just went a little more blue and he went more orange, but
I like to imagine just like chunksters, like just 3-wide chunksters.
Right, like you're just like 3-wide, just like we always had like a weird name for it in like back in the day where it was like sentinels. Like, what do you really call sentinels? Like it's like, because we have like
aggro control,
right,
mid range. Here's what they really are. Here's what it really is, right? Are you familiar with how they term clothes for oversized young men? They call typically that's like a size, right? It's like 16, 20, whatever, right? So then there's 16 husky.
Oh, husky, right. Yeah.
And so this is like these 3-wide aggro decks with like just dudes who have some beef, and it's just husky characters.
Yeah.
Is what it really is. It's like husky aggro is what it is.
You just have like it's like a health pool that you don't realize how big it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Because like
deceptively large.
Like there's just so many times, like even in my top 8 match, like where like my opponent, Butter would swing, and like every time I would be like defend for 5, defend for 6, like so like my 14 health pool character just looks like infinite. It's like it's like here's 5 attacks into your 9-star character. It's like,
not just that, but also like if you get left on 1, like that 1 is going to cost him a real resource to get through.
Yep.
And like it is shocking how important it is that you don't squander that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I think that's really cool. I think this top 8 was very, very just wide. Like it was, I mean, like the opening of Rally and Heed the Call introduced more choices, which is what we were looking for the format, and it delivered. You know, like you got one of each of those copies into the top 8, and then you got one of each legend into the top 8. You know, like so, like you really look at like that, and like at the end of the day, it was a very very widespread top 8, which is pretty sweet, pretty fun.
Yeah, and I think we've seen versions of packs that are orange or blue top, right?
Yeah.
We've seen versions of Starscream that are 4 wide, 3 wide, orange, black, mix all top with blue black top. And the version I'm playing in this event of Ghost Scream, the Car Scream deck is it is a weirdo, is what it is. It's almost like I was trying to build a rally stratagem for the team. But it is, the rally deck itself. I imagine it's one of like 7 different lineups you could take with Rally in it that would be totally reasonable and defensible in this metagame.
Yeah.
And I have no idea which one is the best one either. So,
No.
a lot of room to figure out on that guy.
Okay.
I also think that it's, I think like the Rapid Ascent version of Jetfire is just not well positioned.
I agree.
There are some intentional placements of cards that make it hard to truly keep your opponent empty-handed.
Right.
Right, you can get your opponent there, but it's impossible nearly to keep them there.
Right. There's just a lot of fuel, So.
And that's on purpose. We wanted to do that.
Right.
And it's also cool to see how different the metagame looks from the ATP3 metagame. And it is a huge difference.
Oh yeah, it's. I mean, where's Overlord?
What Overlord?
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that guy was more than dominant, and he hasn't. I don't even know that anyone's even registered him.
I think he got played in a full con as maybe a one of.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Any other thoughts on the top 8?
No, I mean I'm pretty happy with the way this first event turned out with the updated ban list. So we'll have to see. I mean, honestly, this was like a testing ground for it, with ATP 5 coming, and definitely legal for the next Titan 1 event. Like 100% accurate. That'll probably be true. We won't really know what it looks like now. We won't, like, this data is nice to have, but it'll be a nice starter for anyone that's like looking for ATP 5 for sure. Like, what succeeded here? You'll have like back-to-back events with the like before the ban list and then after the updated ban list, so like you'll get to see both sides of that coin, which is nice. But yeah, at the end of the day, Titan 1 for us has always been about choice, and you look at this top 8 and you can see there's a ton of choice. So that's what I'm happy about.
So let's look forward a month.
Yeah, so we have the next event coming up. I believe it's going to be starting on October 9th. I think that's the date that it'll be starting on. And it is with the updated ban list of the addition of Magnetic Dysfunction Ray. Yes, that card is a card, right? We discussed it at length in the last podcast, so we don't need to go back and talk about it. What we will talk about is what that looks like what has it succeeded in, and then what has succeeded in the tournament scene already without even playing a Magnetic Dysfunction Ray. So I'm going to bring up our last event, which would have been the July Full Con event. And then we're going to take a gander at it. All right. So this is the July event. And in this particular event, there were only 3 decks that played Magnetic Dysfunction Ray. This is the second event. This was the ATP season kickoff. We have another one that we can go back and look at, but we're just going to use this one for right now. So this is our kickoff list. And there were 9 Dysfunction Rays in the top 8. However, in the finals, there were 6. So, I mean, there was a dominant display of orange-black right here between the Quake list and the horrible... I mean, like, this is horrible Fangry X, we could just say. Like, we don't even need to say, like, Quake versus Starscream. This is just, this list...
It's just 3 wide Magray.
Right, so, like, 24 oranges, 22 oranges, 26 blacks, 20 blacks, like, 3 whites, 6 whites. I mean, even this pip combination is almost completely spot on to these lists, where like I'm sure if we ran through this one by one, like the similarities are unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this catalyst comes from Magnetic Dysfunction Ray just being a truly cruel card for both of these decks. One being a Quake deck and one being, a more lenient Horrible deck, right? But it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's what these decks did. Like that's what these decks just reign supreme in a metagame. Because even in a world where Magnetic Dysfunction Ray is played in the mirror match, I remember watching this game, and I remember just watching Magnetic Dysfunction Ray end a game. Like, it actually killed 5 characters. Like, that's what happened.
And awful to keep track of.
Oh, it's miserable. But like
Miserable card to keep track of.
It was a bunch of awfulness, but it's like the idea that one Mag Ray was played in a match that had Quake in it killed 5 characters. Like, one battle card killed 5 characters. This isn't even including horrible triggers. This isn't even it's just like Magray plus Quake equaled 5 dead characters. Like, Jesus. And that was in a complete non-Autobot scenario.
There's infinitus on.
Oh, my bad. You're right. You got me. But yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too, right? So like, Titan 1 as a format was largely created by the fact that we thought we needed a place that was safe from multi-Titans, right? That allowed like the metagame to grow and diversify. And Quake and Sky Shadow X decks have not dominated full constructed.
No.
But they have always been relevant.
They've always been there. And they've
always been relevant.
I think that they always will.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we talk about orange-black being a critical mass strategy. And I think if you look at specifically Magnetic Dysfunction Ray, it's just the best part of it's the best part on every part. It's an orange-black to flip, no conditionals. It does 1 damage to everybody, no conditionals. It's a black that triggers horrible, no conditionals. If your opponent's playing an Autobot, God so help them, then they're taking an asymmetrical amount of the damage. And it just gets everything rolling. It is, and the fact that like you're more likely to find it with the likes of Mission Briefing being around in the format.
Yeah.
It's just a lot, and it is the inflection point of the format, right? We got rid of Peace of Tyranny, we got rid of Security Checkpoint, and I really think the last card that remains that really does what those cards did is Magray right now.
Right.
And Press is gone, but we didn't do that one, so.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot, and these 2 decks were, very dominant in that event for sure. Obviously, Quake is just Quake, and then this was like the new big bad of the format. So this is also right. This is the conversation we can have too, because I think this is actually a little bit interesting here. Like, you can make an argument like, oh, Quake has won X events and Quake has done this. It's like, why wouldn't you just ban Quake, right? Well, this is the answer right here. It's like, you just remove Quake, you just put Starscream, and honestly, you can put probably almost any 8-star, right? Like, if we're being absolutely honest, right? Like, you just put 8-star, whatever the best 8-star character in the game is, you just put it here, right? It literally, whatever it is, you just put it here, and this deck would still be a top 8 deck. And that's the scariest part, is like, that's what this version or this consistency in pip color will do to the game, is that Horrible plus Fangry is a deck in itself. It's why I said it's Horrible Fangry X. Quake is probably the worst of it, right? It's probably the worst of it. It's dominated.
But there are 2 legends that would fit in there, right? Because you could play Megs into Galvatron there if you just change the heads around,
right?
And
right, like it. Right.
You just could, and it just would be there.
Right, and that's the scariest part of all of it, is that if you just said, oh, let's ban this, or oh, let's ban that, it's just next man up. It's a next man up attitude. Like, that's exactly what it turns into. So that's why you have to hit the battle deck, because hitting the battle deck at least forces a change in direction, because it's like, all right, well, now you're not going to play Magnetic Dysfunction Ray. Like, are you going to play Precision Fire? Like, all right, well then go play Precision Fire.
Nothing replaces the card. Right. Like, it is an irreplaceable card, right? Like, nothing in the game does what Magray does.
Right.
And that's why we hit it, right? Like, it is a unique card that decides games when it is drawn, and we do not like that super high ceiling, low floor gameplay is not what we're into.
Right.
And it's the same thing Security Checkpoint did.
Right.
PTT is a different story. PTT did not get banned because of high ceiling, low floor. PTT got banned because you played it in the end of the game 98% of the time.
Yeah, it's a miserable experience. I mean, for what it's worth,
Awful.
Security Checkpoint did that also. You just didn't know it yet.
Right, or it drug out afterwards.
Right.
Yeah.
But so wait, let's move on. Right. So we had this Chrome Dome Huffer Orion Pax list. This was played by Soviet Bear. So this was a pretty different list for Constructed. Like Parsec and Chrome Dome, definitely not something you see very often at all. This was Orion Pax's first top 8 in Full Con. I believe there was a couple. Yeah, this was the one where I think we had 3 Orion Paxes in top 8. I think. I
think it's just 2 actually.
No, it's 3. It's all 3 because
Okay.
you're included also.
I forgot. I didn't include myself.
So yeah, this is like the mixed version, right? So like this is our first one. Oh no, I'm sorry. So this is the blue version. So
It's the blue version.
Soviet Bear had like the pretty mega blue version. Like he was definitely leaning blue. And then you had, I think
Stefan.
this is Stefan, right? For some reason it doesn't say his name, but
you can recognize this as a Stefan deck because there's 2 copies of Step Forward in it, and he loves that card in packs.
So this was more orange, but still like a pretty even mix pip. Not like crazy even, but slanted in a blue direction at least. Mm-hmm. And then of course we had yourself, who was like the mega orange. So like you had all 3 versions of like Orion Pax at this top 8. It was definitely a coming out party for Orion Pax in this particular one.
Shout out to the worst sideboard in the tournament, registered under my name.
Nice. So
it is atrocious.
So like looking at these 3 different versions of Orion Pax, there are 0 copies of Magnetic Dysfunction Ray anywhere of these 50 plus cards. Because I'm assuming Stefan's is like 43 in the main deck. That's just a guess. I don't actually know.
Ooh, I'm gonna go count now. You keep talking.
Yeah, it's only 41. I can already see it.
It is only 41.
But yeah, so
shout out to you, Stefan. Much love, man.
All right, so we got Soviet Bear at 42. Let's see, what jank did you register? Is this another?
Oh, I'm at 40.
All right, you're at 40, so you're fine. But
yeah.
the idea here is that there are 3 different versions of Orion Pax here. They're all pretty damn different. Character lineup, stratagems, all of it, pip talk. Like, so it's like with that information, like would you say that Orion Pax is like better conditioned now with the release of, or with the removal of Magnetic Dysfunction Ray and Full Constructed? Or do you
Quake
think
matchup is still terrible? Like, the truth of the matter is that your Quake matchup is still just atrocious, and I do not think that you can realistically take a deck that is less than 40% to win a match against Quake into Full Constructed tournaments. I don't think you can do it. I think that there was too much of it in this tournament, and so Quake ran roughshod over the rest of the event.
And for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure it was the only Quake registered.
Right, but I mean, you could argue that the second place list is a Quake deck that doesn't have Quake.
That's very true.
Like
yeah, absolutely.
And I think that is like a perfect example of like, I do not think that Orion Pax is especially well positioned in Full Constructed. Like you could argue that Magray is one of the best cards into the 4 white orange version, but I don't think the 4 white orange version is all that great, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, you have a lot fewer great matchups because you're not taking characters off the board the same way.
Right, and I mean, like,
and
Kreb,
your guys die.
Like a
Kreb kills your guys.
A Kreb kills your guy, exactly.
A Kreb can absolutely, without a doubt, kill high jump.
Yeah,
right. Toad's not even a question.
No.
But they could very reasonably kill high jump, and like that's not good for you.
And
right?
you're like, ironically, your health pool is actually like incredibly low. Like, it's just compared to like the double Titan decks, like your health pool is like it's a joke. I mean, they have a 3-star head that pops off that has the same amount of health as your dude that starts in play. Like,
God, stop talking bad about that. Also, twice the attack.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I have to agree. Like, it'll be interesting to see if Orion does have this much success as it did last time with the removal of it. But I think it's up for the air because there's a list like this, for example. Like, this is probably my favorite. A list of Aquari always does a great job of like making decks that I'm like, I like that deck. That deck's sweet. This Starscream Perceptor Highbrow deck, like, this deck is pretty goddamn sweet. And I could totally see like this deck getting a little more love because he is a natural blue black. He's actually just a natural blue with a little less black pips, but there's a chance that like you tick this up a little bit because like let's be honest, with the removal of Magray, the uptick in blues will probably be there, right? Like I imagine there will be more blue decks in the full constructed metagame, whereas before it was like it's almost unrealistic to truly succeed with them at a high rate. Like I would say if like even if like 10 people brought a blue deck, you might only had 2 of them in the top 8 type thing because it's just like they're just so at a disadvantage of the orange black decks unless they run completely hot that it just didn't exist. But like with that one removal of Magray to like lower that critical mass that we keep talking about, I think there's a good chance that you'll see a natural uptick in the want to play blue decks, and because of that, you might take a look at like this Starscream deck and be like, all right, what can I do about this deck? And I think like the first idea that I would go to would be playing more black pips in this list.
I wouldn't even mind splitting it a little bit. I wouldn't mind being like have more blue blacks.
Right,
you know,
right.
going up a scouting mission.
Right.
I mean, taking it, maybe even play another RR Disruptor Blade. That card is not as bad as people seem to think that it is.
No.
I will say one thing I love about that deck about not about the Starscream deck, but about the Quake deck is it's a 2 Bashing Shield deck, and I think what you've seen in events maybe the last since ATP4 got released, people have been trending down on Bashing Shields, and I think it's a trend that's kind of a holdover from ATP3 metagame, and I think that we're in a place where that's not right. Take 2 Bashing Shields into your decks.
I mean, the big thing too is the uptick of Absorption Core over Hollow Matter is real, right? So like that makes Bashing Shield a little less worse, right? Like in theory, right?
And absolutely, I totally agree.
Even like Reflector Cell, right? Like Reflector Cell is another one where it's just like it's a utility that quote is an armor, but it's not. So like those are 2 tools that like the blue decks will definitely utilize. But the moment the Bashing Shield goes away, there is a shit ton of powerful armors.
Force Shields.
I mean, there's force fields are fine, but like there's even like I would go back to playing a sparring gear in that world, right?
Yeah, sparring gear is insane. Like
Right.
people have forgotten how good sparring gear is. You mentioned it in your article today on I Don't Believe in Destiny.
Yeah.
But sparring gear versus Bashing Shield was like a mini game that you played in Wave 2.
Yeah.
And it was played for maybe the next 3 sets afterward.
Yeah, basically. I mean, maybe not as much in set 5, but
No, I mean like Wave 2, Wave 3, Wave 4. That was a mini game that people played, right? And that was my bad. But the metagames of Wave 2, the metagame of Wave 3, the metagame of Wave 4, like there was a mini game going on between people who could stick a sparring gear versus who could bash it.
Right.
Or could you run your opponent out of Bashing Shields before you landed sparring gear? And it was an important inflection point at the game that helped decide the game. So.
Yeah, big true.
But I would say take minimum 1 main 1 side, but have 2 Bashing Shields in your 50. And don't play more than 50 unless you're playing something that uses a scrap pile.
Do you think Dynabots is still a reasonable choice for full constructed? Like even with the removal of the card that it was literally made to compete with.
Yes, because the cards that replace it, Precision Fire still doesn't do anything into Dynabots. Cammy Crash still is a terrible trade into Dynabots. Horrible is still going to be a player in the metagame, and Horrible is awful into Dynabots. I think Dynabots are still. And here's the thing people forget about Dynabots is Dynabots just like they have keyword stats on them, right? Like they have big fronts and they have big butts, and that is really important.
And Grimlock is still really good.
Yeah, especially if there's less Magrays, there might be less Hollow Matters in people's main decks.
Big true.
And when Hollow Matter goes away, Grimlock comes out to play.
It's big true.
So
yeah, I mean, looking at this one, this was like there were 2 Starscream decks, there were 3 Orion packs lists, there was a Quake deck, there was I'm sorry, there were 3 Starscream decks, right? So and then there was the Dynabots, and then even if we go back to the other one, there was like 4 Megatron decks or whatever. So honestly, Full-Con is very unexplored even without the banning of Magnetic Dysfunction Ray, and we haven't been there since early July, like when we were building decks in early July for Full Constructed. So like I believe Full-Con is very wide open. I mean, there are like decks in here that were dominant in ATB3 that I don't think are bad. Like Minnesota Menasor is not bad.
You could argue that the card that benefit or the deck that benefits the most from the Magray ban is Superion.
Superion's very good. I still think it has a pretty bad matchup into orange black for the most part because you don't have
I think you're just a 3 stable cover main deck.
probably right, probably. But I also, I think the Soundwave deck, Soundwave Fire Drive deck,
Oof.
is a very legitimate contender in the metagame.
Don't get me excited, Dan. Don't get me excited. You know I love that deck.
I still think Overlord has a place in the metagame. Like I think that a lot of these decks still could see a lot of play, and which is interesting because obviously we knew this was the first event with ATP, the first monthly event with ATP4 legal, so it makes sense that you see so many Starscreams and so many RI impacts because everyone was really excited to play them. But now that we're getting at the end of a metagame, we've had a couple things, we've seen a lot of different looks at a lot of different decks. I'll be very interested in seeing what really comes out next month because with that removal of a very powerful card, it does create openings for little niche things. So it'll be interesting to see who takes advantage of those little niche things.
Totally agree. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see what comes of it.
Yeah, I agree. And with that, I'm prepared to go into our final thoughts.
I'm gonna be honest. I think we covered a lot of it. Keep a lookout for the rest of the ATP 1 year in review series coming out in the next couple of days. In a month, you can correct me on this. I'm gonna overpromise here. Keep an eye out for the earliest part of spoilers for ATP 5.
Yeah, I would think possibly less than a month. That's would be my.
I'm gonna go ahead and say a month and 4 days is what I'm gonna say, but probably before then. But I'd rather underpromise overperform than the other way around.
Fair.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair. Yeah, I mean, we don't have too much to update on the ATP 5 front entrance right now. We are starting our first public playtest event, which starts literally after we're done recording. So there is that. So there's going to be a lot more activity on the Discord, showing off a lot more of the ATP 5 stuff, getting feedback from the community and stuff like that of how they feel about some of this stuff. We're definitely we're pushing the border on some things, I would say, but nothing too crazy, nothing mechanical or anything like that for a lot to confuse or worry about. It's more or less just pushing the limit on certain aspects of the game. So.
Yeah, and I think we're expanding in a lot of different directions this time around. And also, I'm happy to spoil this for people. We're giving Junkion more support than we have in any set prior.
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to be a lot better for it. And I'm really happy about it, too.
Yeah, I think Junkion has always been in our minds. It's always been there. It's always been something we want to add to and support. But in the normal way that we would create sets, it was very hard to just really give it what it deserved.
Totally agree.
So this set does a much better job of doing that, I think.
All right. I have one more question for you before I'm finished with my thoughts.
Okay.
Which is, right now, if you had to pick, what deck would you play in the FullCon event next month?
Soundwave Fire Drive.
Okay.
Mostly because that deck is so much fucking fun.
It's so much fun to play, and you draw so many cards. You could play 42 cards in that deck with some fun singletons. You really legitimately could to keep your pip ratios up on stuff.
Right.
You maybe shouldn't, but
right.
you legitimately could, and I'd have a hard time super faulting you for it. It's one of the only times when I would think that was the case. I would play Menasor.
Yeah.
Your Quake matchup is incredible. That's the only reason why.
It's very incredible. I mean, it's very incredible. We haven't seen it really in in an ATP4 setting too much. Outside of all the testing that was done with it.
Right. Into the ground.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Any other closing thoughts from you?
No, I think that's about it. I would definitely be on the lookout for the talks of ATP 5 going on. The start, probably by the time our next podcast goes, it'll be probably the start of the next event. So like we can definitely be able to like break down the metagame for that, get you guys involved, and hopefully by then we'll definitely have some more confirmed dates on ATP 5 and stuff like that.
Yeah, cool, awesome. Well then, let's call it.
All right. Well, it has been fun talking to you as always, Mr. Wyatt, and I'm looking forward to everyone's second week of cards for ATP 1 and breaking all that down. I'm definitely looking forward. Look out for Blues versus Orange with Christian and Smurf. And then we have Wyatt with doing the Dynabots, and then we have Lord Straxus also coming, and then obviously Christian's doing he's doing double time. Like he's got the thing with Smurf, he got his own thing. Lots going on. So I'm definitely very excited to see all that and wrap that up really well. And it's been a lot of fun. And thank you to the community that's been involved and getting in and having good conversations about it. But until next time, guys, we will we'll catch you on the flip side. See ya.